Thanks, folks. My name is Bob French, and while I'm going to mainly discuss the Knik Arm Bridge, hopefully some of the points we're going to have here are going to talk about some of the common themes that I think help illustrate how budgets and processes become a little bit divorced out of reality. I got a call from a friend back in 2003 saying that there was a new state agency around that had eminent domain power and that they would be affecting Government Hill. Ever since that, with the help of a highly dedicated, skilled team of volunteers, and through Public Records Acts, etc., we've found out a lot more about the decision process and created a website that is heavily documented with information about the bridge and the potential financial impacts to Alaska. As I said, there's common themes. The decisions are often being made on the basis of preconceived ideas, not facts. The promised return on investment is often a little bit too good to be true. There's a tendency to provide some startup money for more projects than we can finish. But while the studies and those plans should be used to help evaluate which projects get funded, the above two problems often mean that that decision process gets blocked. So some of the information we discovered was pretty well hidden. We had friends, co-workers, ex-Kabata consultants, all were very helpful in finding facts. We had to start referring to whistleblowers by numbers. They say the bridge was first touted as being entirely paid for by toll revenues. Kabata's own financial plans show otherwise. Some retired planners called us up to tell us that Kabata was counting on revenue from traffic that only fits on a two-lane road. I'm sorry, on a four-lane road, but they were only showing the cost of building a two-lane road. So needing to include those costs for that phase 1 and phase 2, that raised the overall cost in the financial plan that's included in the legislative audit. Kabata forecasts about 36,000 trips per day across the bridge in 2035. It took a Public Records Act request to find out that the trip forecast done by CH2M Hill based on ICER's population numbers for the Highway to Highway project showed less than half of Kabata's numbers. And Kabata has been pushing the legislature for the past 4 years to help pass legislation reportedly to enhance their creditworthiness. It took several series of legislative hearings and testimony to make it clear that the state was going to be on the hook to make required payments to Kabata's bridge contractors, regardless of how many toll revenues they took in. After a highly critical state audit this last spring, Kabata has been talking at public forums like this one, on the airways, touting their new consultant who is going to be revising their socioeconomic data. What they don't tell people is that new data will be massaged and interpreted by the same firms that were discredited by the audit. So one of the things that we talk about, kind of a fact-free area for decisions being made, the Assembly is required to have a financial plan that shows how we're going to pay for all of our transportation projects. AMATS didn't have the money to show that Kabata's toll revenue forecasts were within that time frame. Therefore, the Assembly included critical budget protection measures that were based on Kabata's promise that there would be no additional state or local funding and that other transportation projects wouldn't be affected by the bridge. This exhibit is from Kabata's 2012 financial plan that was included in the audit. Kabata is still using a $700 million estimate when they discuss the project, but this is where the $1.62 billion cost comes from. That does include a $26 million contribution from the Muni. The state's being asked to provide an initial $150 million to their reserve fund to backstop the toll deficits, but Kabata's own projections show that the state will need to contribute $216 million. Kabata's plans show over $330 million in direct state and federal funding. And Kabata is also predicting that between a third and a half of the project cost is coming from low-interest federal loans, despite being turned down 8 times in the past. Will the feds step up to help pay for the bridge to nowhere one more time? The $97 million here may look like the private contractor is contributing that money and is at risk. But through help from bond counsel, we were able to make Kabata admit in legislative hearings that the state is actually pledging to make payments to the bridge to a tune of $3.3 billion over the 35-year term of the contract. We think that payment is actually going to be much higher than that. Municipality is averaging around $25 million per year for transportation projects. We believe that because of the cost of construction and the cost of financing are going to be higher than what Kabata predicts, we estimate the toll deficits will be about $55 million a year or higher. We're expecting that legislatures outside of the Anchorage and Mat-Su Valley are going to take a "you broke it, you bought it" attitude, and that we're not likely to see those toll shortfalls coming right out of Anchorage's projects. Because the Alaska Railroad has their rail in our rail yard in our community council, we get to see them at their community council meetings. And it's interesting to see how quickly they back away from the idea that the rail spur out to Point McKenzie is being built. They say, well, that's a legislative priority. It's not a railroad priority. Here's why. They're predicting 20 million tons of mineral ore. Is there another Red Dog mine that's out there in secret? We're looking at a huge amount of energy to manufacture cement. The cheap source of energy isn't there. Otherwise, they would have already been exporting this. Being able to transport coal just to Point McKenzie instead of to Seward, is that going to change the economics to where the railroad is already seeing their exports drop by more than half in the last 3 years? And I think Randy talked about the urea production facilities there in Kenai. They're talking about 3.5 million tons of coal to a facility that's now mothballed. So how do we go ahead and sell a project? Kabata does a very good job. They could sound very convincing. The previous slides help provide a little different picture. Let's look at one particular piece. This is again coming out of Kabata's 2012 financial plan. Only 20 years after the bridge was open, they're counting on $395,000 of toll revenue every single day. About 40,000 vehicles. That's more than is presently coming in from the Mat-Su at Eklutna. Here's the little $3.3 billion, in case you were wondering where that number was going to show up again. In 2061, Kabata is counting on $761,000 of toll revenue every day. Toll revenue doesn't show up. We've got 4 major toll projects around the nation that have gone bankrupt, relying on the same type of toll numbers provided by the same company that Kabata is using to do their toll revenue forecast. So, how much can Alaska afford? I think most of these numbers pretty much speak for themselves. If it's $47.85 billion or $72.85 billion, it's clear we've got a lot of projects that are competing for state financing. So, really, Kevin Meyer, the president or the co-chair of the Senate Finance, is clearly concerned about how much we can afford to pay for these projects and whether we can afford to finish them. ICER's lead economist, Scott Goldsmith, also is warning that we can't just continue throwing money at these big, exciting projects. I love this one. Taken from the 1958 Anchorage Times. In 2008, Alaska is going to have 30 million people. So You know, the question we have to look at when you're projecting these potential returns out 50, 60 years down the line, how clear is our crystal ball? And hopefully we're going to be doing better than this guy. Thanks.